have with us John Christopher Frame. He holds master's degrees from Harvard Divinity School, Anderson University, and Eastern Michigan University. He's worked in local government and taught courses at several colleges. He's written a book with a wonderful title called Homeless at Harvard, Finding Faith and Friendship on the Streets of Harvard Square. John, welcome to today's Issues.
Hi guys, thanks so much for having me on the show.
You know, with a title like that, Homeless at Harvard, that's two words that, homeless is one word, Harvard is another. There's got to be a story here. So what's the story behind this book?
It is a great contrast. The story behind the book, guys, is that, believe it or not, there are a lot of homeless people that live around Harvard University. And they live in Harvard Square, which is the business district, kind of the shops and all that kind of abuts Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So while I was a student at Harvard Divinity School, I got to know some of the guys who lived around the university. And after a year of kind of hanging out with them and spending some time in the shelter with them and on the streets and all, then I decided to spend the summer on the streets. And so that's where the book kind of came out of.
You spent a summer as a homeless person at Harvard Square. What did you have to do even to prepare for that, and what was it like in the beginning of that time?
Yeah, those are great questions. Well, I can't say that I was legitimately homeless because I had loving parents in Ohio, where I'm from. I did not have an apartment. So in one way, I did not have an apartment or a place to lay my head except the park or the place wherever I would bed down for the night. But yeah, so before I started the summer, one of my friends on the streets, his name's Chubby John. His words are also in my book, Homeless at Harvard. But Chubby John offered to let me have one of his tents at his secret campsite. And so Chubby John invited me to do that. So the first chapter of the book is about my first week kind of sleeping in the woods. And then after that, then I spent the nights in Harvard Square, where the rest of the homeless population would sleep. And so it was a summer of I was a student as well. I was taking a class about 3 nights a week, I think. So it was a summer of hanging out with people on the streets and also doing some school stuff and just getting to know and getting to learn about homelessness from as close as I could as an insider's perspective. And so it was a very interesting experience, and I met a lot of interesting people, and so that's what the book is about.
Talking to our guest, John Christopher Frame, Frame, author of the book Homeless at Harvard, Finding Faith and Friendship on the Streets of Harvard Square. Why wouldn't those homeless people move south, or do they in the winter? Because, I mean, that's cold up there in Boston.
Yeah, Tim, you are right. And I would say that Neil, who also is in the book, he is the only one that I know of who moves away for the winter time. So Neil typically goes to Southern California in the LA area, but he's also gone to Arizona and Florida in the past.
Well, maybe. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
That was a silly question, but I'm allowed one silly question per show, and I just used it on you.
Okay.
But I want to ask you this too: Harvard is known to be a politically a very liberal, socially conscious place. I'm sure that's what many at Harvard pride themselves on, But how do they handle the homelessness? Maybe they do it well. I don't know, but or what is well? How were you treated by the Harvard community?
I would say that Harvard Square is a unique place. Now, I can only speak of the time when I was there. I think things may have changed based on what I've heard.
Okay.
But I would say that the police have typically been lenient in the past. Not so sure about now, but they would not hassle homeless people too much. Sometimes that may be the case. But homeless people like to hang out in Harvard Square because there are many, many tourists. So, thousands and thousands of tourists walk through Harvard on a weekly basis. And so, there are people who walk by who will drop money in people's cups or offer people pizza or food and that sort of thing. Sometimes if there's food left over from a meeting, it will wind up on the streets, given away to some homeless people. There is a weekly meal, or actually a couple of weekly meals, I think, offered by a couple of churches in Harvard Square. So there are various resources. There are some homeless shelters as well. But your listeners might like to know that Harvard University was the first, and may still only be the only university that has a student-run homeless shelter. So in the basement of a Lutheran church in Harvard Square is a shelter that runs over the coldest months of the year, and it's entirely run and staffed by student volunteers. And so we also had a street team at that time. Of course, I'm not there anymore, but I was on the street team at the time. And so there's a street team that goes out about every night and kind of gives what I would call the provisions of the shelter to the people on the street. So because the shelter can't hold everybody, and not everybody wants to sleep in a shelter, then, we would give out food and clothes to people that we would see.
Why did you do this?
Why did I spend some time with homeless people on the streets? Well, that's a great question. My interest in spending that summer on the streets was particularly to help other people learn about homelessness in a way that maybe they hadn't. So for many people, homelessness is kind of a strange thing. It's kind of unknown. It's kind of in that what is it category. And so I had begun learning about homelessness and homeless people, and I'd been kind of fascinated by the things that I had experienced and the people that I had met. And so I wanted to take the summer to have an in-depth experience so that I could be able to share that experience with others, hopefully through writing. And fortunately, I was able to put the story in a book form. And so my hope is that people, whenever they read the book, that they will be able to think about those who are unlike them or who they think are unlike them. So we typically think that homeless people are unlike us. So my hope is that when people read the book, that they will be able to see maybe similarities that we all have, but also that people will be able to understand homeless people and homelessness as a culture, as a phenomenon, a little bit better than they may have before.
John, how were you welcomed by the homeless people themselves? Were you greeted with suspicion, or did they take you in and make you one of their number?
Great question. Well, I think it all started on my first weekend ever in Harvard Square when I was a student. So this is long before I was on the streets. And I was coming back from church one evening, and I was walking through Harvard Square, and I saw George sitting near where his sleeping bag and blankets were strewn out in front of a bank. And George's hand looked like my mother's hand because he has arthritis like my mom. And so we had a conversation, and, the next time I saw George remembered my name. He's like, "Hi, John," and he would shake my hand. And so pretty soon George invited me to learn about homelessness with him. And so he kind of introduced me to the square, and he was kind of like my main man to learn about homelessness. So I was kind of writing papers and learning about homelessness from George and from people that I met. So I would go to some dinners kind of on a weekly basis. I was involved kind of on the streets as a student, so I wasn't a complete stranger to some. The people who I did not know, word on the street gets around. So people who I did not know, they kind of quickly learned who I was, so maybe I didn't even have to tell them. And so I would say, in answer to your question, that I was welcomed quite well, quite warmly. People, kind of looked after me when they felt it was necessary. And, it made for a much better experience than if I had to kind of defend myself or was worried about some things.
Was there one, we got about a minute left here, John. Was there one reason above others why people were homeless, or is it spread out?
Yeah, great question. I would say that every person is unique, and every person has complexities that it's helpful if we, as non-homeless people, learn about. But I would say that substance abuse often is a factor. Mental illness is a factor, as well as decisions that they made personally, or decisions that were made by them, maybe by parents or other influencers in their lives.
Okay. Listen, John Christopher Frame, F-R-A-M-E, has been our guest. What is the book, and what is the website?
Yeah, the book is Homeless at Harvard, and the website is homelessatharvard.org. So I welcome listeners to pop on the web and click on homelessatharvard.org to see lots of pictures and some videos of some of these people I've spoken of.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.